myself comfortable here. But it's like the olden days, this. Going live off a selfie stick. Haven't done many lives recently. Haven't done many fresh YouTube videos recently. But that's because I haven't had a massive amount to say. And I've been very, very busy. Book's coming out soon. And so I've been working on that, and I've had some personal stuff to take care of as well. Today I wanted to talk about something that I've observed that I think is a bit of a problem. And it's a cultural problem that relates to psychology, and it relates to a way that I think we're trying to live that is not sustainable. And it's a cult of responsibility. What I'm observing is that people are placing too much of a burden on themselves and on each other to be responsible for understanding the motivation for the actions of others. I want to say this as simply as I can first, because it helps me organize my thoughts and it puts us all on the same page. So what this means is we're in a time where culturally I'm claiming that the expectation is that you should understand why the people in your life do what they do, and that this is not normal, that this is probably new. It's been the entire time I've been alive, but I don't believe it's always been this way, and that it is to be laid at the feet of psychology. There is a process, the term for which that has been coined, I've heard it used by Jonathan Haidt, but I don't know if it's coined by him, is psychologization. And it's the way in which the narrative of psychology, the worldview of psychology, has broken out of Pandora's box and is now there in the world, where we're all encouraged to think as though we're all psychologists, where we're all encouraged to be psychologically literate, where we're all encouraged to be, and I loathe this term, it's so pompous and so virtue signaling, trauma informed, as though there were a type of psychology that were not trauma informed. It would be like saying I'm a linguist and I'm syntax informed. It is so effing stupid, but okay. We all know what trauma informed is. We all know what being psychologically literate is. I'm not an intellectual thug. I'm not an intellectual barbarian. I'm not going to say, oh, you don't need all that psychoanalytic jargon. You don't need all the complex terminology. Actually, I believe it's necessary. For the gnomic engineers of psychoanalytic theory, for the elves who work in the machines of psychology, yeah, they should know. 11 different ego defense mechanisms and 12 different symptoms of such and such a personality disorder. The rest of us should not. So, in simple terms, to keep it simple in the beginning, and then we can get into the slightly more complex areas of this later on, my position is, you don't need to know why anybody does anything in your life except for your children. So if your partner does a shitty thing to you, they treat you in a mean-spirited way, or they do something criminal, or they transgress a boundary, what is normal in our culture now, it's completely hyper-normalized because we're so psychologized, for us to wring our hands and say, why? Why did they do this? What's in their childhood that makes them talk to me this way? Why have they abused me? How did their mother treat them? What did their father do to them? And what I'm saying is, that's none of your business. It's not my business. It's not your business. That is between that person, their therapist, if they've got one, their priest, and God. Because you've got no way of knowing why they're doing what they're doing. None. And you shouldn't be burdened with the responsibility of trying to figure that out. It's completely inappropriate. I'm saying that we are so sick with this, and we're so thoroughly convinced with blind, idiotic confidence that this is a good way to live, we're even encouraging our children to think like they're psychologists, as though being understanding and empathetic were the highest order of value imaginable in a human life. Empathy is important, compassion is great, but to say that it's the highest order value is beyond insane. And it is, if we're going to organize a culture in this way, where empathy is the highest order value, it's like having fairness as a high order value. Fairness is important. You don't want to, a culture is not going to sustain itself over the long term if it's completely unjust. It's just not going to work. But to say it's the highest order value is, quite honestly, is puerile. It's childish. Fairness is important. It's not the highest order value. Empathy is important. It can't be the highest order value. Why? Because we're not children, and this isn't a kindergarten. We're not toddlers with nannies. You're not your partner's mother. I'm not my partner's mother. I'm not my boss's mother. I'm not my best friend's mother. So if any one of these other adults, and they are adults, behaves in a way that is bad, it's not my job to psychoanalyze them and ask why, because I'm not their daddy and I'm not their mummy and I didn't raise them. There's a concept. I'm playing with it. I haven't been asserting it very confidently because I really only sort of thought about it and stumbled across it inside of my own head about 6 months ago. And I just want to check it first. And what I've been saying to myself and what I said in a few videos is, I don't see how we can be responsible for things that we can't control. There might be a rule that has legitimacy that says you are not responsible for things that you can't control. That doesn't mean if somebody else did a thing and it has bad effects, you shouldn't do something about it because you're not responsible for it because you can't control what somebody else did. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you cannot directly be held responsible for something you didn't do. You cannot directly be held responsible for something that you cannot control. If it's outside of your control, it has to be outside of your responsibility. It doesn't mean that you're not responsible for dealing with the consequences of it, because that is within your control. So if there was a fire, somebody else set the fire, you go, well, it's outside. I'm not responsible for that. I can't control it. I'm not going to do anything. Well, that would be untrue, wouldn't it? Because you can do something about it, and so you should. So it's within the sphere of your control to do something about the thing that somebody else already did and to deal with the consequences of it, and therefore you'll be responsible for it, and therefore it's within the boundaries of control, right? But when it comes to people, if you're not my child, I'm not responsible for you. I'm responsible for children. If I produce another human being, and they're under the age of, 14, I guess, they're completely my responsibility because I have complete and total control over them. After the age of 14, that control slips and the responsibility goes with it. Broadly speaking, everybody agrees with that. Nobody talks about it, but that's how the legal system operates, largely speaking, broadly speaking, along that principle. But my partner is not my child. My best friend, my boss, anybody else who could transgress my boundaries, abuse my kindness, do this, do that, do the other thing, I didn't raise them. They're not my child. So I'm not going to wring my hands over what they're saying and what they're doing and question, like, why? Why did she do that? Who cares? Like, why are we even asking that question? How did that get normalized? My partner was mean to me. Why does she do that? Is it because her dad wasn't around? Is it because her mum was mean to her? What difference does that make? What business is that of mine? What I'm saying is that we've covertly entered this phase, this cultural moment where we're mothering each other. We're treating each other like each other's mothers. We're treating each other like each other's psychotherapists. And it's incredibly boundary breaking and extremely unhealthy. Not to mention burdensome. We're all operating under a tremendous burden of guilt and responsibility. There are things that you're told and being told daily to feel guilty about that you have no control over. It's not fair. It's not fair to do that to a human being. You're responsible for that. You should feel guilty about that. Why? Why you didn't do it? If you could push a button and stop a war in another country, would you do it? Of course you would. It wouldn't cost you anything. You'd do this. It burns half a calorie, a quarter of a calorie. You just push the button and you can end terror and suffering. Of course you would. Everybody watching this would. But you can't do that. You can't do that. So am I saying do nothing? No, I'm not saying do nothing. Am I saying you shouldn't worry about it? No, you should be worried about it. I mean, people are really suffering and it may come to affect you. So absolutely you should be thinking about it. What I'm saying is you shouldn't feel guilty about it. And I'm claiming that people feel very, very guilty because of this process of psychologization that's crept into the culture, where everybody feels responsible for everybody else's actions, and they're not responsible for them. If you choose to do something as a follower of mine, even if you claim that you got it from watching my videos, I am 0% responsible for that because you're not my child. You're a sovereign adult. You're separate to me. Inside of interpersonal relationships, a lot of people who are here following me because they've been hurt within romantic relationships. And then afterwards, they find them very, very difficult to break out of. They find them very, very difficult to walk away from. Why is that? Well, if you listen to my more recent interviews with Sam Vaknin, he's proposed the dual mothership model of narcissism. And I discussed this with him in February in Prague, and those videos are out. They're on my channel, they're on his channel. And I've sat with this and thought about it for a couple of months. And I've come to the conclusion, this is the whole of culture. We're mothering each other. We're in a phase of, we're in the matrix. The matrix means womb. We're inside of each other's wombs. It's a horrible, weird, awkward image, but that's how we're communicating to each other now. We're saying, climb inside my womb. Once you're inside my womb, I will feed you a narcissistic narrative. That's the blue pill. That's the film everybody lives, the simulation everybody lives inside of the narrative. Meanwhile, I'll drink your milkshake. And then you can do the same to me. So you climb inside my womb, I'll feed you my narcissistic fantasy. And then to reciprocate, I'll climb inside your womb and you can feed me your narcissistic fantasy. And that's how we're attaching to each other. It's incredibly boundary breaking and extraordinarily dangerous. And it leads to overwhelming feelings of guilt and a strong, hysterical drive towards virtue signaling, because we're trying to prove to each other's mothers, to each other's mother states, that we are good people, but not as adults, as toddlers do. This is how toddlers, little babies, signal to their mummies that they're a good little boy or a good little girl. It's not adults saying to each other, I'm a good object, you're a good object, I'm okay, you're okay. It's not like that. Virtue signaling is always, well, the term comes from biology and it has deception built into it. If you look up, just look up, if you look up signaling biology, and then you read some articles on it, it's typically somewhat deceptive. Typically signals between animals, because animals can't talk, so they have other ways of communicating with each other, called signals. False signaling is written into the model of signaling itself. So it has deception written into the concept. We as human beings have then taken it and called it a certain pattern of behavior, virtue signaling, where you're only signaling without saying, so it's by implication, it's through posturing to other human beings, I'm very virtuous. And this has become a kind of virtuousness. Who can be the biggest empath? Who has the biggest matrix? Who has the largest, warmest, roomiest womb for everybody else to climb inside of? Again, slightly comical imagery, vulgar imagery, blah, blah, whatever, but I really believe this is what we're doing. Now, I mentioned before complexity. So you can understand pretty straightforward, right? At an individual level, this is what we're doing. We're mothering each other. If I'm your mother, it's my responsibility because I made you and I raised you to know why you do what you do. So you do a shitty thing at school, you kick another kid in the head, and then we're in the principal's office. I will and should think, what did I do wrong? You know, is this some of his father's DNA? Did I choose the wrong father? Did I raise him wrong? Right? If I'm your father, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll be like, God, has he got this from his mother? Was I too strict? Was I not strict enough? Blah, blah, right? You know, why? And it's my responsibility because I made you. I physically made you and then I raised you. So you do these things, it's inside my control. So it's my responsibility. But outside of that, somebody does something, it's not your responsibility. And it goes further than that. It goes further than that. It's not just about people. If a nation does a terrible thing, it's nobody's business. It is nobody's business to ask, why are they doing that? How do they feel? Do they feel bad? Do they feel threatened? What's in their history? You've got to remember, psychology as we know it today is heavily influenced by psychoanalytic theory, which means it's heavily influenced by Freud. So even if people say, oh, we're 100% anti-Freud in the field of psychology, nobody escapes Freud. No, because even if they're against Freud, they've built an anti-Freud system. So we're heavily influenced by Freud. One of Freud's proteges is Jung. Of note, Freud and Jung both wanted to be archaeologists. Adler did not. Adler wasn't a protege of Freud. He was a peer. Adler's different. Adler's his own thing in terms of the founders of psychoanalysis. Freud and Jung are archaeologists. Archaeologists explore the past. They decode symbols. They are kind of Indiana Jonesy style, descending into the depths of the underworld of somebody's unconscious, which is in the dark, and figuring out the symbols and the magic and the spells that they find there to bring back into the light to individuate the client or help the client move forward or help the client become a healthier individual. So it's rooted in the past. It's rooted in darkness. It's rooted in symbology. It's rooted in mysticism. And it's rooted in an archaeological view of the human being. You're digging in the dirt to find remnants of a previous time. It is past focused. And they spend a lot of time in tombs. And tombs are wombs. They're wombs for the dead. So you go, oh, Freud, oh, tell us about your mother, blah, blah. You know, it's very funny. Yeah, but it's literal as well. It's literal. Archaeologists go back to tombs. They go back to wombs. They go back to dead wombs and find out what somebody's history was, or a nation's history, or a culture's history. What I'm saying is, not that this is useless, but that it's only one way of looking at human beings. It's only one way of looking at trauma. And that maybe it's a perverse way. Maybe it's a corrupt way. Maybe if it was one of five and we used all five in an equally weighted way, or even if there was one of two, and Adler is a great counterbalance to Jung and Freud. Adler is a brilliant, perfect counterbalance. Then we would be okay, but we don't. We don't. Our psychology of today is Freudian psychoanalytic theory, is Jungian. It's mystical. We all psychology believes in the past. All psychology believes the past is the future. All psychology believes in mystery, mysticism, symbology, the unconscious, the tomb, the womb, going backward, going downward, going inward. It is the most yin discipline on earth. Even philosophy is balanced, yang and yin. You can have yin and yang style philosophers. You can have those who are outward moving, sun following philosophers, and you can have inward moving, moon following philosophers. You can't say that about psychology. You really can't. It's all yin. It's all in, back and down towards the earth. It's all earth moving. Mother is here on earth. Father is up and away, is aspirational. Mother is what is, father is what could be. This is why some linguists say, maybe this is a step too far, but some linguists say mother in most languages across the world is ma, 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 ma. In English would say mama. But in a lot of languages across the world, mother is m, m, m. But father is typically, so in English it would be, depending on where you're from, pa, pa. It's away. It's a further away sound. M, m, m is a closer sound. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. Take it as an interesting side road. Ignore it if you don't like it. I take to it. I like it. But psychology itself encourages motherhood. Psychology itself is a mothering discipline. Psychology itself is a yin discipline. Fine. Motherhood, great. Nurturing, great. Yin, great and necessary. But what happens if we get out of whack? What happens if we're just yin with no yang? Well, in Chinese medicine, if an organ is out of balance, it leads to death. It leads to death. There's supposed to be, in Chinese medicine, for all organs, for all cultures, for all nations, for all humans, for all martial arts, a balance and a dynamic tension between yin and yang. All yin is collapse. All yang is stiffness and death. Well, yang, too much yang would be tyranny, stiffness, death. Yin would be chaos, decadence, collapse, and then death. It would fall in on itself. Yang becomes a tower, which is too stiff and too tall and falls over, and yin is just a downward going. Nietzsche called this the Untergang. If you've read Thus Spake Zarathustra, and if you have, may God have mercy on you. He talks a lot, obviously this is where he posited the idea of the Untermensch, but he talks about the downgoing of humanity and the upward going of humanity. Apparently there's a linguistic ambiguity in German, so if you say Untergang, it means undergoing, the path that leads downward, but it can also have a meaning of like the setting of the sun. So the implication in Thus Spake Zarathustra was this was the end of civilization. This is a roundabout way of me saying, these coordinates bring us down. These coordinates put a civilization into recession. We are not each other's mothers. We cannot act as each other's mothers. It's incredibly unhealthy and unhelpful for children to do it. It is not a child's responsibility to understand why someone else is doing what they're doing. Listen, it would be wonderful if we were evolved enough as a species to be able to do that, to be these floating, third eye opened, fleshless beings just floating around in white cloaks, but we're not. We're not. We can barely deal with what. Your only responsibility is to deal with what has happened. If it is a nation, a person, a corporation, a military, and anything, you only are responsible for knowing what they did. Why they did is between them and God. It's not your responsibility. And none of us should be living with this heavy, heavy burden of guilt and responsibility. Because as we're weighed down with this burden of guilt and responsibility, why did they do it? Just know that they did evil and deal with that. This weight of and burden of responsibility and guilt, it's pushing us down and it's leading to the Untergang, the downgoing, the setting of a civilization. And if we don't stop it soon, we're going to collapse under the weight. We're not responsible for each other in that way, nor should we try to be. I will take questions now. Please make them one sentence long and have them end in a question mark. That would be wonderful. Hibernian Perspective says, great stream. I saw you on the Jolly Heretic, Ed Dutton's online public house a few weeks ago. You were a fantastic guest. That's very kind of you. Thank you, sir. The thing that concerns me the most is encouraging people to try and understand evil. There's just no point. There is no point in trying to understand evil. There's no point in training people to think that their first response to evil should be understanding. The only people who benefit from that are evildoers. Because whilst we're all stood around in a circle wringing our hands, saying, oh, well, why would they do that? and stroking our chins, exploring psychoanalytic theory as to why somebody would do a terrible thing, they're already planning their plots and getting on with evil. Are you releasing a course on the active and passive voice in narcissistic abuse? Yes, it will be out in the next 2 weeks. Potent's here. Thank you, Potent. Thanks for helping on the channel. Potent is moderating for us. Katya asks, if you had to co-parent with an NPD BPD, oh God, thank God I don't have to. Oh, I lost you. Let me find you again. How would you support your kids, Richard? I wouldn't do anything dramatically different with my children. If I was raising children, I would expect them to raise them as sovereign, individual, small adults. That's what I would be raising them to become. Gone through their childhood, passed through adolescence, into adulthood. Everything would be pointing towards that. And it wouldn't change. It wouldn't change. The emphasis would change, maybe. Some of the conversations would be different. But ultimately, my children's best protection against evil would be strong boundaries, a sense of their own values, and a capacity to say no and to think critically. And that is what it is. You're trying to raise them to be able to defend against evil. So they have to have a strong sense of self. They have to be raised to think. They have to be raised to manage their own states, to have an understanding of physically, mentally, and emotionally, and to be able to work with that, and then a good sense of how the world works. So I wouldn't dramatically do anything different, because whether you call it NPD or BPD or anything else, evil exists in the world, and there is really only one way to deal with it. Kick out the JHM says, Richard, why has humanity's greatest enemy become responsibility? I'm not sure I'd agree that humanity's greatest enemy is responsibility. What does that mean? The greatest enemy of responsibility is responsibility. No, the greatest enemy of humanity is probably stupidity. Or inbreeding, or where inbreeding leads to stupidity. The greatest enemy of humanity is probably humanity itself. I don't think we face any major existential threats outside of other humans. We're the great threat. We're the great enemy of humanity. But what part of us is the great threat of humanity? The shadow side of humans is the greatest threat to humanity. And we have a responsibility to individuate from our shadow, for sure. Owen Thomas says, it seems to me that people don't want to be held accountable for anything. Oh, how can I highlight your comment? Oh, I can't do that outside of StreamYard. It seems to me that people don't want to be held accountable for anything because they are fearful of blame shifting onto them. Yes, I agree. This is a fairly new thought for me. I was like, why is nobody demanding decent service anymore? Why does nobody, or very few people, complain when the service is terrible in any situation? Why have we all got this sort of tepid, oh, I'm cool, you're cool, kind of a thing? And people just get away with murder. People get away with absolute effing murder now in a business sense. So unprofessional and so incompetent and weak. And I came to the same conclusion as you. Is like, no, we don't hold each other accountable because we're also lazy, incompetent, and weak. Like, broadly speaking, I'm saying we, So we don't want to hold other people to account because we don't want to be held to account. So we're just a bunch of dummies, lazy, incompetent, phone addicted dummies with one finger up the bum, um, not holding each other to account. We're basically like in an incompetence forgiveness economy. So I give you my incompetence forgiveness, hoping that you pay it forward, and I get my incompetence forgiveness, and so nobody gets called out. So nobody calls each other out, and this is why I really like the Sam Vaknin video talking about isolating and quarantining people with mental illness. It was a challenging video, and it upset some people, which was its intent, I'm sure. But it's a really important conversation to have, which is like, why do we do this? Why are we so indulgent now? And where's this going? Is that and like the obvious answer would be like, well, because we're kind, we're so empathic. And I'm like, but if what you're doing does more harm than good by numbers, because a lot of the people who are very deeply into empathy and compassion and moral relativism are very collectivist. They tend to be, or they tend to think of themselves as being collectivist. And I'm like, but by numbers, statistically, this mode of being does far more damage to far more people than if you actually consider the possibility of taking somebody who is a psychopath, they're mentally ill, in an antisocial way, and just saying, we're going to isolate that person. We're going to quarantine that person because, well, they are literally ill. They have a mental virus. They have a mental virus that's contagious. And if we don't quarantine it, it will pass on, which we know happens. Prolonged contact with the mentally ill induces mental illness in the otherwise sane. It's not conjecture. It is known, Khaleesi. This is what happens. So it's a conversation we need to have. It's Licious says we need to free ourselves from the conditioning to be distracted by each other's reasons. I loved hearing this. Thanks, Richard. Yes, because life is short, and actually, if we were being really honest, it doesn't do us any good. Why did my ex-husband do? Why did he say? Because his mother was like this, and his grandfather wore the red and the thing, and like, so what? So what? Whose business is that? You're not his mom. Who cares? Who cares if somebody's acting like I'm not going to swear, like a flower pot, a naughty. I've been with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old all day, and I'm not swearing. If they're, it's the first thing I saw was a flower pot. If they're being a very, very naughty little flower pot, it doesn't matter why they're doing that. It only matters that they are doing that. That's all you have to deal with. I hereby absolve you. In nomine Patris et Filius et Spiritus Sancti, te absolvo. You don't have to deal with that anymore. You don't have to do that anymore. You never did. Neither do I. Nobody does. We do not have to psychoanalyze each other. In fact, we shouldn't psychoanalyze each other. It's not kind. It's cruel. It's boundary breaking. The only person who should be psychoanalyzing another person is a paid psychoanalyst, whether they're paid for or court mandated or privately paid for or state paid for. That's who does the psychoanalyzing. The rest of us should do none of it. That's not to say you shouldn't try to be understanding, but your understanding has to have limits. Why? Because I'm not responsible for things I can't control, and I'm not your mother. I can say this. You did a thing. I told you not to do it. You did it anyway. I told you it was going to hurt me. You did it anyway. Well, I did it because, your reasons are all your reasons, and that's fine. But it's none of my business. My business is what you did, not why you did it. Why you did it. Why? I don't even know why you're telling me why you did it. I didn't ask to be told why you did it. I know what you did. The end. I know what you did, and that's it. That's all you have to deal with. Don't let anybody get inside your head and try and condition you and brainwash you into thinking that you should know why. You should know why your partner's being abusive. You should understand why a corporation, a nation, a culture, Anybody is being abusive. Abuse is abuse. If you're acting in a way, if you're being badly behaved, that's it. I don't care why. The sheer amount of stress and mess and time wastage, energy wastage we're going through right now as a culture, through all this, it's nonsense, by the way. Nobody knows. There is no human being alive, I swear, by God, may God strike me down dead right now if I say one word of a lie. There is no human being alive on this planet now who knows a goddamn reason why another human being is doing what they're doing. None. No, no, none, 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 no one, no one. Because my mind and my brain are hermetically sealed in here. Your mind, your brain is hermetically sealed inside your skull. I do not have access. Nobody knows. You can listen to me. You can ask me. But are you aware of a thing called lying? People lie, not just to you, to themselves. Sometimes it's not a lie, it's a confabulation. Sometimes it's not a lie, it's a hallucination. Either way, I'm still misrepresenting the truth. Human beings lie a lot. Let me say it like this. Human beings misrepresent the truth a lot. A lot. Let go of the fantasy. Let go of this narcissistic fantasy that we have an infinite ability to help other human beings. We do not. There are some people who are so sick that we will never, never, never touch them. Let go of the idea that you can know why another person is doing what they're doing. You'll never know. You will never know. You may think you do, but unless you can enter that person's consciousness, which you can't, no matter how much of a flipping super empath you think you are, you'll never know. Let it go. The idea that you can is pure narcissism. Pure narcissism. It is the fantasy of a child. Let it go. Let it go and enjoy the freedom from the burden of having to pretend that you know. So I don't know. In all humility, as God is my witness, I do not have the strength and the power to know why another human being is doing what they're doing. May God forgive me, and may God forgive you. I don't know. I do not know. And that's the way it is. And then just let it go. And just, wow, amazing. The burden just disappears. All that guilt just disappears because you're not inside of my control. Your behavior, you are an adult. You are an adult. If I'm a totalitarian dictator and I have a gun to your head, maybe. But unless you are my child, unless I made you flesh of my flesh, I don't know. Like, I guess you can do what you want, legally, morally, ethically. So I'm not responsible. Don't try and rope me in. Don't try and make me responsible. So I would say to people, just let it go. Embrace humility. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to just say, like, I'm just one person. I have two eyes, I have one head and 2 feet that I wobble around on. For 1/3 of my life, I am completely unconscious. I sleep 1/3 of my life. Many hours a day when I'm not sleeping, I'm daydreaming or watching TV or reading books or scrolling social media. I am not that smart. I'm just not. And honestly, I don't even care that much. I don't, like, I could pretend I do, but I'm just like everybody else. I don't actually care that much because I'm concerned with my own life, as everybody else is. I've only got one and I'm aging every day. Haven't yet found out the way to slow down time, and it seems to be moving by pretty quickly. So in all humility, I don't know. Isn't that healthier? Problem, they keep punching people, they keep hitting people. Quarantine them. Quarantine them. Oh, but they had a bad child. Well, that's sad. I'm really sorry. If I could push a button and change that, I would do it. But I can't. I'm here now. You're being a dickhead now, we have to quarantine you, we have to isolate you because you won't stop. And in that, I can admit in humility my limitations and my weakness. I'm not God. I didn't make you. I didn't create you. I don't know why you're doing this. Let it go. And you just let it go. It's so good. It's so pleasant. This, I think, I've mentioned religion and religious overtones a couple of times in the last 40 minutes. My suspicion is that psychologization and the psychologization of everything has filled the gap that is the God-shaped hole in our lives. So we've tried to fill it with psychology, because before that we could just say it's the will of God, or it's just the way it is, or I guess we'll know when we die and go to heaven. But now that we don't have that, we now, A, we need to know the answers on earth, and B, we've put ourselves in the position that used to be occupied by God. So you're almost coerced covertly with this hidden injunction, like, well, you better figure out what the answer is because you are God. Or at least you're sat on the throne that used to be sat on by a God and you kicked him off. So you better come up with an answer. So we pretend. A bunch of kids, walking around with adult-sized stethoscopes and adult-sized white coats, pretending to be doctors and scientists, saying, yeah, we know why people do what they do. No, we don't. No, we don't. We have the genetic answers. No, you don't. We have the psychological answers. No, you don't. We have the evolutionary answers. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. We know barely anything at all. We don't know most things. The most important questions in life, we have no idea. The most important questions in life, we still have no idea. And I'm not advocating for an intellectual barbarism. I'm not advocating for throwing away science or moving backwards or trying to live like it's the 16th century. That would be a completely unreasonable request. I'm advocating for more humility and to being open and just saying, we really don't know. We don't know why we're here. We don't know what this life is. So we don't know what life is, and we don't know why we're here. Okay, that's all right. That's all right. That's okay. Everything that comes after that, you know a thing, and like there are things that science really knows. There's things that, like, if you have a sore tooth, they can put you asleep. They can take the sore tooth out. They can put another one in. Amazing. They can replace your heart. They can do brain surgery. Amazing. Wonderful. We can fly in the sky. Wonderful. Amazing. Science, engineering, physics, chemistry. Fantastic. Well done. Fantastic. Really, really good. But just put it in context. We don't know why we're here. So we don't even, like, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but this is why we're in a constant battle, a constant argument about how to live. How should we live? That's all politics is, by the way. Nation versus nation. Really, politics. How do we live? It's humans trying to answer the question, how do we live? How do we live? We don't know why we're living. And it's impossible to answer the question, how should we live? Because we haven't answered, why do we live? It's literally impossible. You can't have, say if it was a battle plan, you'd be like, how are we going to battle? Well, the first thing you ask is, what are our objectives? We have no objectives. Let's just create tactics. Like, go take that to any military historian or anybody who's serving in the army right now and say, okay, I want a battle plan and I want some tactics, but there's no objectives. They'll be like, well, you can't. It doesn't work. Systemically, no funciona. You can't do that because you have to have objectives first. We don't know why we're here. I'm not saying like, so therefore switch your brain off, put down all your degrees, your books and whatever else and just go and pray. Though God knows it would do the world a bit good if people had the humility to go and do that. I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying just be humble. Just stop lying. Just stop pretending that you know when you don't. We all have to stop lying. We really don't know. But we're in a phase where we're in a desperate rush, it seems to me, to enforce an idea of living on each other. And I would just say, let's just stop. Let's just take a breather, because none of us know. Sortek, who sent in 20 doll hairs, says, question. This lets me know it's a question because it starts with the word question. Have you ever heard of anyone sexually abused, my goodness, in childhood. Now in adulthood is hypersexualized. Yes, this is common. And on the cluster B spectrum, yes, common. To recover, ooh, yeah, they could do. Any help to develop healthy boundaries again. I couldn't do that through a YouTube video, I'm sorry, when I'm answering questions at the end of a YouTube video. Sexual abuse in childhood is such a heavy, immersive boundary break of some of the most vulnerable elements of the developing child's being, that the therapeutic intervention that follows in adulthood should be similarly immersive and what do you call it? It kind of needs to be global. It needs to impact every single element of the adult who is in recovery in the way that the sexual abuse that took place in childhood would have impacted every single element of the being who is developing. So you would need, in my humble opinion, and this is something that I've experienced myself and gone through myself, really a full system do-over, belief change, a belief system check, a core value check. Really your whole philosophy of life would need to change. The way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you move, the way you treat yourself physically, the way you treat yourself emotionally, all of it needs a review and all of it needs to be changed. And that's the best advice I can give you within this limited format. I hope it's useful. Ian Dmitrievich, question? Not. Thanks for your hand, mnemonics. You're very welcome. I'm using both new and old one. This has literally changed my life. I'm glad to hear that. My emotional flashbacks would last for days and not anymore. I'm really glad to hear that, mate. Anybody who wants more information about how to do that kind of work for dealing with emotional flashbacks, the information is free. There's a free course. It's been used now by thousands of people. I'm happy to report. It's been out for a couple of years now. It's on YouTube. It's called the Fortress Mental Health YouTube channel, and it has a full course there that teaches you how to do the things that this gentleman is mentioning. I highly recommend it. I'll take one more question and I'll go to sleep. Got a lot of people asking me about childhood sexual abuse. If I could avoid that being the last question that I deal with, I would like that. Okay. How should one reveal to an immensely intelligent and talented, yet self-destructive 19-year-old bollocks? Once I've lost it, it's hard to get it back. How should one reveal to an immensely intelligent and talented, yet self-destructive 19-year-old golden boy with redirected anger that his mother is a covert narcissist, something he is utterly blind to? Why would you need to? Why would you need to do that? Why do you need to convince a 19-year-old boy that his mother is, in your opinion, covert or fragile narcissist? What is it in you? And what is missing in your life that makes you feel so driven to create a realization in the mind of another about your perceived state of some other third party beyond? I mean, you're asking a question about changing the consciousness of a second party, which is, it's neither good nor bad, but that is what you're doing. You're not saying like, Richard, help me deal with my anxiety about butterflies or whatever. You're saying, how do I change the consciousness of this person about his view of another person the further away you get from the trunk of the tree, which is your life and your responsibility, the more you're moving into other people's stuff. And I dig it, man. I like, you see a young man, you see him in danger, and I don't know, or that's your perception of the situation, and you think it would be helpful for him to have this realization. And I get that, and God knows, you could be right, maybe. But what's definitely true is that it would be good for you to explore why you feel so strongly compelled to do this, and to let go of a need to do it. Tragedies happen, people suffer. What's your responsibility? What's your responsibility? Is your life perfectly in order? If it isn't, and I know that it isn't, get it in order first, and then see how you feel about the situation. Sometimes it can be easier to get involved in other people's stuff so that we don't have to deal with our own stuff. And you could be doing with this with the best of intentions. And it fits in with the theme that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, which is that we are encouraged to feel responsible for other people's stuff these days. And you know, you're really not. You're really not. Your responsibilities are actually quite limited because your control is quite limited. Your control is you now. And honestly, are you in complete control of yourself now? No. So when you admit that I'm the only person I can be in control of, theoretically, this is 100% accurate, is me. When can I be in control of myself? In the past? No. In the future? No. So I can only be in control of myself right now. That's the only thing and the only person I'm in control of is me right now. Okay. Am I 100% in control of myself right now? No. Wow. So my responsibility just shrank from the globe and all the wars and all the trouble and the economy and the environment to just me. And you go, oh, well, that's a big shrink. And then you go, now cut it in half, because you only half control yourself, right? And that's where you want to come back to. Question, Richard, are you single? I'm a singular entity located at this moment in time and space now. What is the agenda behind psychologizing everything? Is there an agenda in your opinion? Says Strong-Minded Coaching. There is an agenda. I'm not sure this is part of an agenda though. For sure there is an agenda. So whenever I do an interview with Potent the Rockstar, at some point we always end up discussing like a sliding scale of intentionality with any scenario. On the one side, we like largely say, and this is usually my position, I lean towards this position. It's all spontaneous. There's no agenda. Weird things happen because it's almost like an archetype that manifests, or a morphogenetic field in the Sheldrake idea, that this is the thing that we're going to do now. And things really do show up spontaneously. And even if they're showing up spontaneously across large groups of people in different continents, it can still happen. It can be the moment for an idea and it shows up. At the other end of the spectrum, there's an Illuminati, weird men in dark cloaks, I don't know, jerking off into a goat skull in the woods, forming secret bonds to do terrible things to enslave humanity. And there's a scale. Most of the things that we see in the world are chaotically spontaneous, but there are things that are, men in dark rooms deliberately coming together and conspiring, which means breathing together. Respire, inspire, it's breathing. Con means with, conspire means they're breathing together. But for it to be a conspiracy, they have to breathe together with evil intent. That absolutely happens. We know that it's happening all day, every day. With psychologization, I suspect it's more spontaneous than conspiracy. But it is interesting that it fulfills an agenda of making people weaker, more indecisive, more hyper-feminized, more doubtful of themselves, and more open to brainwashing and propagandizing. It also means they're more susceptible to being abused by predatory types. Why do I think it's spontaneous? I think it's a natural knock-on effect of losing religion. I think it's a natural knock-on effect of Nietzsche's proclamation in 1885 that God is dead and we have killed him, and that now we're really going to struggle to wash the guilt and to wash the metaphorical blood from our hands. And we're going to have to create an awful lot of sound and fury and noise and festivals to cover up the sadness and the guilt. And so between 1888 and now is not a huge amount of time, and we're still really, really struggling with this. In that space where God was, we have sat on that throne. We've put ourselves in the God space. There's a God-shaped hole in all of our lives. We don't believe in philosophy anymore. To believe in religion is anathema to our culture. And so we shore everything up with psychobabble. And it has a very often a religious tonality to it. It's a global, or we're trying to use it as a global descriptor of human behavior and of the purpose of life. It wasn't designed for that. Even Freud, at his most manic, delusional and grandiose, and high on cocaine, never thought of psychoanalysis as being a grand narrative for explaining all of the mysteries of life. I don't think. So. We're really misusing it. But I think it's a natural. I can track from like 1901 to now why we would become more and more and more dependent on psychology to describe ourselves and our lives as time goes on. Because God knows we're not using religion, and God knows we're not using philosophy to do it. So what else is there? I'm going to stop there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time and for your attention. I hope that this was useful and that you will now stop taking responsibility for things you don't need to, and that you can live a less guilty life in the name of Nietzsche. Let us pray. Om Nietzsche Namaya. Om Nietzsche Namaya. Speak to you soon.